Hello and happy Monday, all you nerds. Welcome to 2023. I spent the last week and a half essentially being sick out of my mind, which means a lot of the projects that I wanted to work on over Christmas break had to be put on hold as I just did my best to regain some semblance of a functioning body. I also incidentally didn't feel up to doing what I normally would do the week between Christmas and New Year's, which is just look back on the old year and decide on goals for the new one. However, I'm feeling better now, so let's do that today, why don't we? As most of you who've been following me for the last year know, I went back to school this past fall, which has been one of the most difficult but also most rewarding experiences of my life so far. For some context, I had planned to go to school to study astrophysics ever since I was like 13. I remember that just being a plan in my mind year after year. Then when I eventually graduated from homeschooling at the age of 17, I just kind of didn't. There was no plan or thought or discussion. It's just when the time finally came, I didn't go. This was probably for a number of reasons. For one, bachelor's programs that specifically focus on astrophysics are pretty much non-existent. It never occurred to me that you could just go for a degree in physics and then specialize when it came to my graduate degree. Physics as a bachelor's program is pretty abundant in schools throughout the Midwest thanks to the many uses the discipline has in engineering, which is a field that is very beneficial for society, in case you haven't noticed. So I could have quite easily found a program back in the day, but of course, even this language of academia was something that no one in my family was familiar with or could help me out with, so I was pretty much on my own when it came to figuring this stuff out. Since that time, I spent much of 2020 and 2021 relearning a lot of the science I grew up with, as well as studying subjects which I just missed in my kind of just self-driven education. That's where I learned a lot of the foundation for what it would mean for me if I'd gone to school to study science and what my life would have entailed. Somewhere along the line, however, I got rehooked. Apparently, the passion which had left me long ago as a kid was still alive somewhere, and I started wondering if it might be possible to pursue this career in spite of my status as a grown-ass man. Objectively speaking, this was of course not a great idea. With 2 kids and a stay-at-home wife, I was in no position to be going back to the drawing board with my work life. But I figured I'd put in enough time at the job which was sucking me dry, and thanks to my dad being willing to let me work for him in his company while going to school, I was eventually able to come up with a plan for making ends meet while also pursuing an education. So I thought, hey, I've done the right things, right? I've put in the hours, so to speak. Let me try taking the risky path for a change. I'll be honest, things haven't been super easy this year. When I made plans to quit my job as an electrician, I figured working all summer would allow me to work on creative projects as well as keeping up with house stuff. Instead, I ended up spending most of my spare time taking care of paperwork and other school-related responsibilities, as well as working on finishing up my yard before the summer came to an end. I did finish it, incidentally. Here's a picture. Looks good. To be honest, when school started, I was almost certain I was doomed to failure. A full-time college student typically takes 15 credit hours per semester. I was taking 12 this past semester in order to be technically full-time, but even that workload was a lot. I had to somehow find time to get nearly 40 hours of schoolwork done while also working at least 30 hours per week in order to make ends meet. It was a brutal schedule, especially thanks to the classes the school picked out for me. Instead of everything being kind of fitted neatly together in a nice, neat manner, classes were spread out throughout multiple days and different times, which meant that on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I was pretty much forced to go straight to school, as even though classes didn't start till 9, there was no sense in trying to get any work done in the 1 or 2 hours I might have in the morning. Then after 2 classes, I'd go to work for about 3 hours before having to come back to campus in the afternoon for the chemistry lecture. Then I'd leave afterwards to work the rest of the day. However, it's the Tuesday and Thursday class which really took the cake. Aside from the inconvenience of it being the only class on those otherwise free days, the assignments in the class were the biggest waste of time you'd ever wish to see. The class itself was meant to be an introduction to the topics you would study as a physics major. That, in and of itself, is a great idea. Physics is a broad subject, and most of the students at Mines don't get into any actual physics classes here until their 2nd or 3rd semester. The problem is, how do you grade such a class? The answer, in this case, was by having a crap ton of assignments. Most of them were just write-ups, which I honestly did not mind, but then there were those which were just non-stop events and workshops and things which weren't on the schedule, but you had to find time for them because they were part of the class. See, I can handle homework. I'd specifically blocked off times to work on assignments as well as studying for exams, but when you have to be at the career fair for an hour, or go to the student organization fair, or attend a meeting at the physics club, or a workshop from the career center, that's a lot to try and work into an already overbooked schedule, especially when you're stressed out from realizing that there are apparently entire parts of algebra that you've just forgotten. See, when I went back to school, I wasn't stupid. I knew I'd have to take like an entrance exam to get in, so I got to work right away studying the math needed for a high school GED as well as the SATs. Seemed like the best bet, right? Like, high school was my highest level needed, and the SAT was a test used in high school by organizations testing students, and honestly, for the most part, this plan worked out great. However, I don't know if you've ever taken the GED. It's not a hard test. Most of that test requires that you have just a basic understanding of what a sentence is trying to tell you, as well as basic mathematics and some geometry. In that test, I got near perfect scores, and the SAT wasn't too much more that I didn't at least vaguely remember, so I was able to pass the requirements the school had for high school algebra pretty easily. So you can imagine my chagrin when a week into trigonometry, I started learning about concepts like logarithms and the quadratic formula seemingly for the first time. Like, I'm inclined to believe that it was in fact not my first time hearing these ideas. I mean, I did take Algebra 2 in high school, albeit self-taught. But for all intents and purposes, this class was my introduction to Algebra 2. There's a lot of talk in STEM academia, especially for first years, about the dangers of imposter syndrome, but for me, I quite literally was an imposter in a lot of these classes, just doing my best to not get caught in confusion. Honestly, if it hadn't been for YouTube lectures giving me a free and easy way to give myself repeated crash courses in these subjects I was spotty in, all the science and math related classes would have almost certainly ended in my failing. Failing a class in college is certainly not the end of the world. It's be expected. High school students are gonna struggle when they first start taking these high-level courses. But for me, like, I'm supposedly this huge science geek, right? Like, that was how my family and friends always saw me. To suddenly not be the smartest person in the room, to be the person that sometimes was the last one with the right answer, it was starting to wear on me. This was, of course, my ego talking. In my sleep-deprived state, I was no doubt overacting the struggles, which I honestly just should have seen coming. I can't ever express how grateful I am for those at the School of Mines for talking me off the proverbial ledge when I needed it, as well as never treating me like an idiot or like I was out of place, in spite of the fact that when it comes to mines, non-traditional students like me were pretty few and far between. The one class which I think really helped keep me grounded was Comp 1. I was only taking it for the general ed requirement, but after the first assignment, I was very quickly reminded of why I love writing in the first place. It felt great to be in a class where not only did I feel like I was not the last person in the room to understand what was wanted from me, but where I could also thrive in the assignments. It felt good, and it made me want to not just be a better writer, but to also be a better student. As the weeks went by, I began noticing changes. My grades were steadily improving, but additionally, other things were starting to make sense as well. In chemistry, the more advanced concepts were starting to build upon each other, making the whole picture become clear. In trigonometry, not only could I remember the process for solving problems, but what was going on was making sense as well. I was hoping for all C's, and instead I ended up only getting one C, the rest being 3 A's and a B. That's certainly not as great as the younger me might have wanted, but after this year, it's a huge accomplishment. I don't always feel at place in mines. Most of the freshmen are 7 years younger than me, and at this point, there are even a few grad students that I'm older than. This certainly was not the plan that 13-year-old me was hoping for, but at the same time, I do kind of feel at home in academia. I'd forgotten how good it feels to learn new things and what a great experience it can be, especially when you're in an environment where everyone is interested in learning. This year I didn't accomplish many goals or get many creative projects done, but I do feel like I know myself in a way that I've been struggling to for quite some time. The experiences I gained this year were some of the most exciting of my life, even if I didn't get a lot of actual goals done. I mean, only a few months ago, I was a mile underground where people were doing experiments searching for dark matter and studying neutrinos. How crazy is that? Anywho, I don't actually have any goals for this coming year. I've Got a lot on my to-do list, but at the moment, I'm going to take a cue from this video I recently watched from GCP Grey and just pick a theme for the year. I'd never heard of this approach for New Year's resolutions, but I already love the idea and I love the video. So if you want to check it out, it will be linked in the description below. This year for me is going to be all about balance. I've got a lot on my plate, from family to making a living to pursuing this new career to even a new creative project which I've been working on, which I'm hoping will help me in eventually pursuing a career in science and STEM communication. However, this level of work is going to require a tremendous amount of balance in order to maintain my mental and physical health. So this year, that's all I'm going to worry about, like finding the perfect balance. It's not going to be easy. But when it comes to choosing between different opportunities at school, and getting chances to hang out with friends and family, deciding what creative projects to work on, at least I have an approach that'll make the decision process easier. I'll start with what action would help me achieve the best balance today, and then just kind of go from there. So anyway, you may be wondering, what does this mean for the channel? Well, for starters, you can expect there to be a lot more like shorter scripted videos kind of in this format compared to the long form podcast episodes and stream I experimented with last year. Hopefully it won't end up being too much to handle for me. Fortunately, I've got a much better school schedule this spring semester, so fingers crossed, things should only continue to get better. At least that's what Optimus Prime, who's currently hijacking my brain, wants me to say. At any rate, I hope you all had a great year, and I wish you a wonderful new year. As always, I love you, love yourselves, and I will see you very soon.